Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Saltworks podcast. We are so happy that you're here. I can't wait to share this episode with you today. We have a special guest, someone who is a new friend of mine that you need to know about. Her name is Samantha Decker. She is a debut author of Unhurried, an invitation to slow down, create margin, and surrender control to God. Man, do we need that message more than ever. And that's exactly what we talk about today. Samantha is just this wise and humble voice who she's a mom, she's a wife, she is now an author, and she is a speaker. And she just brings so much truth, grace, but also truth into these areas. I can't wait to share the book with you. You're going to love it. You need to order your copy. But before we jump into the conversation, I want to tell you about a couple of partners we have today. If you are a local listener and you find yourself in need of an MRI, CT, X-ray, or ultrasound, you need to know about Northeast Imaging. If you aren't familiar, Northeast Imaging is a patient-friendly diagnostic testing facility that is doctor trusted and patient preferred. They are located at 1703 Lammy Lane in Monroe. Their friendly staff provides high-quality scans focusing on the delivery of exemplary care to the patient and their referring providers. Whether you're using your health insurance or you're paying cash, Northeast Imaging is almost always more affordable than local hospitals. They're open Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., so mark that decision off your list and tell your healthcare provider you want to go to Northeast Imaging. It is spring. It is post Easter now, and there are all kinds of trips being planned. Lots of running the roads for sports, recitals, end of the year things. Make sure that you are signed up for the Chevron's Rewards Program app. You might have heard people talking about how they're saving money on gasoline on social media by word of mouth. This is how. It's super easy to set up, and new users will receive 25 cents off per gallon, up to 25 uses. Yes, per gallon. For the first 5 uses when you download the app. Plus, each time you use the app, you are earning 5 points per gallon that can be redeemed for future discounts, ranging from 5 cents to 50 cents. You can even get additional in-store purchases for earning additional points. Right now, users are saving about 13 cents per gallon, and the best part is the app is completely free to you and very user-friendly. So what are you waiting for? Go to the App Store on your phone, type in Chevron Rewards, and download the Chevron app to start saving today. And now to my conversation with Samantha. Samantha, welcome to the Saltworks podcast. I'm so excited you're here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's fun to be here.
It's so fun. I had to stop our conversation because I feel like we have so many things we could talk about, and I'm like, wait, I need to interview it, and then we need to talk about all these things later.
Yes, I love it and feel like we do. Maybe just go grab coffee.
Yes, yes, I know we do. I wish we were in the same town, but we will plan that for sure. We always start every episode with who is Samantha Decker?
It's a good question, and I feel like it's weird to try to say, like, who am I? Um, but what I would say is obviously, first and foremost, I'm a follower of Jesus. If nothing else, that is what I want people to know about me. The way I do that is obviously through writing. I will get to talk a little about the book, and it's exciting and fun the way the Lord has provided. But most of my days, I am being a mom. I am a mom to 4 little people, ages 8 and under. I have 3 boys and a baby girl, and then I'm a wife, and I teach Bible study at my church, and so that's kind of where I'm spending my time these days. Anywhere from, car line sitting to Bible study prepping, and that's what my days look like.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Um, this people will have heard this in the intro, but I want to read the title of your book again. Unhurried, an invitation to slow down, create margin, and surrender control to God. Um, every book has a story. Um, and I'm curious what led you to these truths, but also led you to want to write them down for others. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'd love to. So, really, it was almost 7 years ago at this point, which is crazy to see just what God's done. But I was in the middle of a season, really where I was trying to do everything. And I think we get there without knowing it sometimes, but I was a mom, I was working full time, I was serving at the church and trying to, be the Pinterest mom of everything, doing all of the things. And there was just this really simple interaction one night with my neighbor. I walked out just to get the mail, and she was out there and said, Samantha, I don't know how you do it all. And there was a moment that I kind of was like, selfish pride, just I'm doing it all. I'm doing all these things. And as the Lord does, he quickly got my attention that night, actually, through the book of Haggai, which of all the books, I was reading through the Bible in the year, and that's where we were. And there's a verse in chapter 1, verses 5 and 6, where it says to consider your ways. And he's talking to the Israelites there, and they had the temple had been destroyed, and he told them to rebuild, and yet they were building their own houses and planting their own vineyards and earning their own money. And they were doing all of these things that weren't necessarily bad things, but they weren't what God had told them to do. And so, through that, in that moment, that's exactly what I felt like God was telling me. He's like, you're doing all of these things. They're not bad things, but you're not doing what I've asked you to do. You've made your life so hurried that you're not asking me, what are your purposes, God? What do you want me to do today? So that's what started it. That night, I wrote the first sentence of Unhurried, having no idea it was a book, honestly, at that point. It was more just, God, what are you teaching me? What are you showing me? And through the years, through the seasons, I kind of, God started teaching, it started refining. I realized it was probably bigger than a journal entry or whatever it may be. And it became a book.
Wow. So beautiful and a really good one. I am not finished yet because I am very purposefully not rushing through it. I'm not hurrying through
I
it,
love it.
even though I would love to, but I have pretty much underlined or highlighted something on every page and
Mm,
also sent
mm.
screenshots to my husband. So we're both enjoying it.
I
Him
love that.
vicariously
I love
through
it.
me because I have not given him my copy yet. But it's so good and it's so timely. I'm curious to hear from you. Did you have any fears in writing this book at all?
Yes. I think anytime, and you'll know this as a writer, how anytime you put something out, there's a lot of fear associated with the vulnerability of the stories and the truths and the, how will this be received? But I think on the other side of that, this was something I've told people I almost couldn't not write it. I think when God calls you to do something, and it was so clear He called me to write this book, you can't not do it without being disobedient. And so anytime I've experienced some of those fears or doubts or uncertainties of is this what you wanted, God, or is this, what will people think about this or anything like that, he reminds me. He's like, this was what I told you to do. So that gives me a lot of peace and confidence in the sureness I have of the book and the words. And my other fear was that nothing I ever put out, I don't want it to be biblically unsound in any way. And so I think for me that was a really good part of the process, was to go to some really trusted Bible teachers and women that I respect and know that they know the word of God, and ask them, okay, scrutinize every page, scrutinize every sentence, make sure this points to God and His fullness and His truth and stands firmly on the strong foundation of the Word. So, I'm pray that that's what you see all throughout the book too.
Absolutely. That is so very evident in it. And I mean, I can relate to both of those fears so vividly, but I also like hearing you say it and reading what you've written can be like, no, everyone who reads this is going to be feel so seen and connected because like you hit on humanity so well here. And so, you can see that more clearly in other people, I feel like, but it's
Mhm.
very well done. Thank you. Um, okay, one of the first things that hit me like a ton of bricks was You pointed out that an article in the New York Post reported that American families get just 37 minutes of quality time together per day, and that there are 1,440 minutes in a day. That was shocking. Was that shocking to you to read? And why do you think that is?
Yes, and it's still shocking, and I wrote that, I saw it, and I'm still like, 37 minutes, that's it. I think that it's twofold. One, we're so busy in the sense of even our family members, we all have our different pieces of the day. I joke with my husband lots of times, we just high five in and out the door as we're taking one kid here, one kid there, getting the baby down for a nap or whatever it may be. So I think it's just the nature of our culture is to be on the go. Um, and then the second thing is, I don't think we are intentional to create time, to create margin, both to seek the Lord and to spend time together. We just kind of assume it'll happen when it happens. And to be honest, it doesn't if you're not being intentional to seek out really specific time together. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's hard.
Mm. For those listening, can you give us the Samantha Decker definition of what margin is and what that can look like?
Yes. So I love in the book, I share my grandma as an English teacher, and she like instilled in us like, go look up the definition of words, identify the parts of speech. It was always this. So anytime I started, seeking, I'm like, okay, God, what does this mean? What is this truly? And so margin, really the way I define it in the or the dictionary definition is just a spare amount of time, but it's usually given for special situations. So the way I look at that is in scripture, we see Jesus model it, we see others model it of they create a spare amount of time for specific situations, and those specific situations are ultimately to seek God and his purposes. So when I think, what I hope you think of when you create margin is that idea of intentionally creating space within your day, within your schedule, um, to meet with the Lord in whatever way that looks like. It may be, spending time really digging into this word, or it might be spending intentional time with your family around the dinner table. So,
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. That's so good. And did you feel like when you first started employing that in your life, maybe even before you knew exactly what you were doing, I don't know how that looked. Um, did you feel that it took, I mean, I want to say like dying to self, but also dying to culture and just the expectations? I mean, I feel like some people pleasing kind of has to die there in creating, learning those habits of creating margin. Did you feel that?
yes, I love the way you said that. It is. It's a dying to all of it because like we said, it doesn't happen naturally. And so sometimes that means you have to choose your no's. You have to choose what you say yes to. And sometimes people, it won't make sense. One thing, like, as I was going, I realized um, that even good things can be things that the Lord is asking us to lay down so that we can pursue His purposes. And so there was a season where there was an opening at our church to do a little bit more, and I wanted it. I wanted to do it, and my first instinct was like, yeah, of course. And it was kind of in the same season that God was teaching me of, like, what are my priorities? And I realized, like, I think he's telling me to say no here. And it kind of shocked some people, like, are, wait, what? So shouldn't you say yes to that? And it was against what maybe a lot of people expected or thought, but the fruit of it was really sweet because it ended up, I needed to be more present for my family in that season, not even knowing that ahead of time. And so when we're obedient to what the Lord tells us to do in creating these margins and spaces, He's really faithful, I think, to meet us in them.
Mm. I love that. And I feel like I'm in a season, especially coming through like the book launch and things that you can very much relate on. Um, that I'm like having to teach myself to be inconvenienced to parent. Like, and I hate even using that word because there's like a negative connotation, but I think we have to start there from like our mindset of culture of like, no, like we just have these rhythms and everybody needs to fall into place, but like to like make space mentally and in the physical time of our day, like to be inconvenienced for the people that I love. And like when there's no margin in the day, everyone feels that stress because we don't have time to deal with whatever just came up. I'm sure you can relate to that as a mom of four, but I've even heard of like ministers and businessmen being like, hey, I can't do that tonight. I have an appointment. And their appointment is family time. And that's not dishonest. That's like, no, if I didn't set this, it would get swallowed up. And so, are there specific things that y'all have learned to do in your family that's like, I don't know, maybe weekly or daily or things like that where you're like, okay, we're gonna hit the holidays and here's like some, I don't know if boundaries is the word you'd want to use, but here's the margins we're gonna create here.
Yeah, and I think really what that comes back to is, we scripture tells us we look to the interest of others, right? And as moms, as parents, a lot of that involves looking to the interest of our children. What do they need from us in that moment? A 2-year-old doesn't understand, you know, sorry, I need to send this email. They're like, I need you right now to, you know, come whatever, build the Legos with me. And so I think it's both being recognizing that, what their needs are in the moment and discerning what we should say yes to. But like you said, I think there's this rhythms we need to implement. And so I think I'm still learning, and there's even as my children age and transition, I'm learning like what they need too. But my husband and I have always said, since kind of saying yes to the Lord with this unhurried life, is that they'll come first. And so if, my son has a football game on Saturday morning, I'm saying no to the podcast interview request on Saturday morning. Like my husband or my children come first. So it's that, and then just being really intentional with the time we do have in the evenings. So I would love to say we sit down as a dinner at the dinner table every night, but that's not true. We do some nights, and those are important. But like any family, where we have things in the evenings and we're choosing this, but it's again when we are there, making sure that's where we are. We're present and focused and meeting um, them there with the purpose of glorifying the Lord in our conversations and our parenting in our day.
Well, and I love that you pointed out that like you're still learning because like your season changes, the margins change, the needs change and the schedule and how that plays out and also how like sometimes our family time looks like this because when you have small kids like you can create all the margin in the world and there still might be chaos. And like
Yeah.
chaos is not necessarily the same as hurry and busyness. You know what I mean? Like you can have a slow
Yes.
day and but you've got four people with needs and there could be chaos, but they still were seen and you still were present. And like that, I think sometimes as parents can be like, did I do it right? Because, we had the chaos. But yeah, I
Yes.
don't know if that brings up thoughts, but for
Oh,
you,
so many. Yes, I love it.
yeah. Um, why? Okay, so our culture like loves efficiency and loves busyness. It's praised, and you've hit on that so well. Like, even in your example with your neighbor, of like, that does make you feel accomplished. And like, we all felt that with you, like, um, but why is hurry detrimental? We've talked about kind of to others, but also to ourselves, Samantha. Like, why is it that we need to really handle this topic with care?
Mm, That's a great question because I think you're right. It is detrimental. Like that word feels strong, but it's used rightly. And the biggest thing I come back to is um, when we are so focused on our own plans, on our accomplishments, on our ability to do more, to be more, we take our eyes off of Jesus, which obviously then leads us in a path we don't want to be on if we're followers of Jesus. We want to be, again, seeking Him first. So, there's a verse in Colossians that says to set your mind on the things that are above, not on the things that are here on earth. And when we are hurried, we have a really hard time looking up. We're so, looking down at our to do list, at our calendar, at our, priorities for the day, and we're missing what God is doing, which means we're hurting our witness. We are failing to abide with Christ. And really, we're not putting in place these spiritual disciplines that God has called us to do because we're so focused on what's right in front of us, which doesn't mean, I think we have to hold this rightly. There's things in our day, they come up. It's not bad to go to the grocery store or, respond to the email or whatever it is you have in front of me. But what it means is that we do that continuing throughout our day to ask God, okay, at the store, how can I look at this eternally? Is there somebody I can pray for? Is there somebody I need to stop and have a conversation? Can I help the mom struggling with their toddler? Like, it's being slow enough to say, I have time for that because that's what matters. Or when you're sending the email, can you say, how can my words be full of grace and seasoned with love in this email? Because I don't know if this person's a believer or this coworker is walking through a hard season. Um, it's doing normal things, but with an eternal perspective. Um, because otherwise you get to the end of the day and you're saying, God saying, what did you do for me today? What impact did you have on eternity today?
Mm. I feel that to my core because I was just telling my husband yesterday, not even about this interview, although I read the book yesterday some too, but just because like coming out of this season of marketing this book and running, 90 to nothing between the book launch and also still motherhood and like the spring time. I don't know what your kids spring looks like, but ours is like there's 3 Easter hunts on the same day. We've got Iowa testing. We've got kindergarten pictures. They need to have a shirt pressed for that. Like it's like a special need every day. Like taping 36 eggs before I go to sleep, that sort of stuff. And it's fun things, it's good things, but it does create a lot of hurry because the margin is so small. And like I have found myself feeling burned out. And I looked at Andrew yesterday and was like, I can't have an eternal perspective when I am feeling this burned out because I'm just too weary to. Like I don't have the capacity. How have you seen your capacity grow for eternal mindset and eternal perspective in creating margin and in those things you just talked about? How have you seen that flourish and not reach points of burnout, or do you still struggle with that?
I definitely still struggle. I wish I could tell you I don't. Um, there's there's grace in that. But one thing God has taught me is the importance of rest alongside the importance of work. We hold both of those rightly and equally, and He models that for us. I love looking at the creation story through that lens of saying, for 6 days, God created, and on the seventh day, He rested. Now He's God. Did He need to rest? I mean, no, He's God. But He modeled it for us because He knows that we need to rest. We are finite and, um, we need to slow down. And so I think that when we look to that example, like you were saying, Hallie, like we have to slow enough to rest. We have to make sure that we are keeping our eyes on Him in that. And so at the end of the day, we can say, maybe there's still things on my to do list. Maybe they're untaped eggs or whatever it may be. But we say, today was enough. What we did today was good. And then we rest. And we know that sufficient for the day is its own trouble. So tomorrow we get back up and we do it again. But um, I think it's okay to say, this is enough and leave tasks unfinished, which is hard. We're not great at leaving unfinished tasks, But sometimes I think that's what God wants us to learn is it's okay.
I love when you talked about that because we look at that and we're like, okay, his work was finished. How do we know our work is finished? But I love that you talk about like it's at the end of your capacity. Like, like
Yeah.
when that is what you are able to do, um, then that is enough. And like I think there's a huge surrender part of that of like, am I working for myself or am I working for the Lord? You know?
Mhm. Yes.
Because if he would have given me the time and capacity to meet the expectations he had. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Um, that was so good. I loved that you pulled that out.
Yeah, and I think
Did you have a
just to add
thought?
one more thing there, Hallie,
Yeah.
is sometimes there are seasons when maybe we feel like we're at the end of our capacity and there's still more.
Mm,
And so I don't want to negate those. I think sometimes we say, God, I really feel like this is it. And yet the baby is still awake, or there's, caregiving that has to happen, or and I think the Lord gives us strength for that too. We serve with the strength that God supplies. And so I think we need to rest and we need to create time for it. But sometimes there are seasons when it doesn't feel like there's enough, but He knows that too. So I would just let that be an encouragement if you feel like you're in a season where you're like, that sounds great, but I have this and I can't rest. God will meet you in that too, and give you the capacity that you need to do what's ahead of you.
I love that. Thank you for that, Samantha. Um, you talked about how hurry can be, I think you might have used the word like a breeding ground for idolatry. And we have hit on this, but I would love for you to just like really speak to that because I think wording it that way and seeing it that way is really helpful for people to be like, oh my goodness, yes, that's where I'm at.
Yeah. So when you think about idolatry, I think it's thinking about anything that you're putting above the Lord. And hurry is a really easy way to start saying, okay, my plans are more important, God. Um, my ability to complete this or to achieve this or do this is more important, God. And maybe we don't realize that's what we're saying, but if you look really closely at your heart, um, that's really what it's showing. And that's, I think, a hard truth for us because we're like, oh man, like, is that the way that my day looks? Is that the way that I'm living? Um, but what we do with that is we recognize that the hurry, because we know that to be true, it helps us slow down, right? Again, we know that doesn't mean it necessarily has less on our to-do list, but like we've talked about, we view it in the lens of eternity. And so um, I think awareness is really key there and asking God, okay, is my hurried lifestyle putting things above you? And if so, taking some time to repent and to lament those things and come to the Father once again.
I love that. I love that piece of just coming to him and being like, what do you want me to do? Like, even like I have learned like in surrender in my life, like even having to ask him is admitting that I'm not God. Like I'm not sovereign. I don't know. Like I don't know the needs of my family over the next year because I don't know like what will hit. I don't know, what will they need when they're 10 and 8 and 7. You know what I mean? Like I only know where we're at now, but you do. And like looking to him and like I can so see when I'm in a hurry. I don't have time to ask those questions. Um I loved this. You said, I wonder how many times we miss opportunities because we are too hurried and too focused on getting back to where we think we should be. The start of obedience often involves pausing and listening to the prompting of the Spirit. And I wrote in the margin of my book, like, what irony is that we can be like so in a hurry and yet so unsure of what we ought to do and where we ought to go. And I'm like, that was hurtful, Samantha. That was. But that is where I am at. So that was so good. I just wanted to read that for people to hear and to remind them they need to go get this book right now. Um, how have you been able to hold these? Like, I want to know this for myself, but I just think this is so relatable to people who are trying to figure out how they cannot hurry in their vocational work. But how have you been able to hold these truths in the writing and the publishing and the marketing, like how has that looked for you and what have you found that's helped?
Mm. Yeah, this is a good question because I feel like I'm really learning this right now. And I'm having to say, God, okay, these are the truths you've shown me. How do I apply that in this season? How do I learn that in this season? Which is part of this book. I think we'll never master this. And that's kind of the process of sanctification, ultimately, of becoming more like Jesus, is we always are going to have to. I share, I feel like God constantly is telling me, like, Samantha, slow down again, look to me again, consider your ways again. Um, but especially in this season, one thing that I've been trying to do is both have a yes ready. So saying, like with this, how, like, yes, that's something I can do. Yes, my schedule allows this. Um, but not just jumping to an immediate yes. Um, Asking God first. Okay, God, is there margin for this? Is this what you want? And usually, like, I think with the book and things, he's like, yes, I've called you to this, like, do this. But there's been a few times I've had to say no just because of what we talked about. My kids had something else, or, there were other needs, other priorities that had to happen. So I think it's that. And then it's also when you think about plans, I could have a million plans for writing, for speaking, for getting the word out. I know that, I love this and I love that God's called me to do it. But I also have to keep it in a right perspective of God, it's for you. So keeping in mind who he is, um, and you hit on this, Hallie, of like, he's sovereign, he's in control, he is all powerful, all knowing, he's king of the universe and he can do what he wants. So I think when we submit to his lordship over our lives, over our days, and specifically like over my book, over promoting, over publishing, I'm like, God, your will. So it's, if he opens doors, great. If he closes doors, I'm going to praise him for that too. I'm practicing that daily. I'm having to learn that daily, but it's again saying, because of who you are, I'm just going to keep stepping little step, obediently walking in the way that you want me to walk. So I'm hoping, that answers your question, and I'm
Yeah,
learning is
it
really
does.
where I'm at.
No, but I love that like honest and humble answer because one, it's so relatable. Two, it leads to truth because like what I have seen in your book, because your tagline has surrender it, my book tagline has surrender in it. And like what
Ugh.
I've learned about surrender, and I don't know if like you can relate to this, but like I can remember I was writing a specific chapter and I was thinking through a message I was going to give to some college students. And I was like, we're going to talk about abiding. Like I'm going to teach them how to abide, which makes me laugh to say out loud. But like, I'm like, that's what we're going to do. That's what we're going to learn. And like, I'm not saying we cannot teach on these topics at all. Like, I'm not wanting to be black and white about this, but I like learned in trying to write that message that like if I were to teach someone how to abide, would I have really taught them the essence of what it is, or would I have given them a checklist that promotes self-sufficiency that really like lines up with a lot of biblical principles? And like your book like does the right way so well because like it gives you practical tips but it leads you to the spirit and like it I just wanted to say that to you because like I know that the wrestle of that of like I want to write things that make you feel seen, but I also want to lead you to the Lord who is going to lead you in all of these nuances. And you handle that with such care.
Thank you. I appreciate that because you're right. It is a really fine line, because I think we could say as authors, as speakers, like, trust the Lord, follow the Spirit, and those things are true. Like, yes, but then people are like, how? And I'm like,
Yes.
how? And
Yeah.
so we learn, and we always go back to scripture, um,
Mhm.
because that's where he tells us how. And so
Yeah.
Um, but I did want the book to be practical. I
Hmm.
want you to like be able to say, I'm taking steps to live unhurried as the result of this. But you're right, more than that. I'm like, I want you to know who God is through
Yeah.
his word and through his spirit.
Mm. Yeah. I am wondering, when you were writing this, did you have a reader in mind, or was that something you thought about like more in the marketing? Who do you feel like this book is for?
Mm. When people ask me this, it's funny because in, sharing how it came about, originally this was for me. I was the reader, I was writing it to me. Because I didn't know how to live unhurried. I didn't know what God wanted me to do with this. Now, that shifted at some point, and I can't even really pinpoint where. And I think it was once I started recognizing it was more than, just processing on paper. And so, what it became then is for people that were similar to me in the sense of they they plan their days. They like to have control over their days. So this may be somebody who's a little bit more type A, who has, the inclination to try to line up everything just like they want it, because I there is good in that. There's strengths in that. I think God can use those things. But like we said, if we're holding so tightly to the control of our day and that we're forgetting to see what God is doing or saying, God, what do you want me to do? Then that's where we probably need to iron out some issues there. So that's really, if that's something you struggle with, I would say I hope that it really meets you there. Whether you're a college student or whether you're 60 plus and approaching retirement and you're still trying to plan your day.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I mean, I have seen that because my husband and I have both talked about it, and like he is more of a planner and I'm not. And we're both like, oh
Mhm.
my goodness, this is so good. And so, yeah, it's so relatable. And I love that you said like those, like the planning and the creating order is not good. Like that's, in so many ways, that's imaging your creator. Like he created order out of chaos. That's like part of the creation. Um, but I love that you bring it back to like, but are you doing it with the creator? Are you doing, like, are you going back to him? And that's just really powerful. What do you hope, like, what has been your prayer in launching this book that people will walk away from? Like, if it doesn't do anything else, this is what I hope that someone walks away with.
Mhm. My prayer ultimately is that you would know more about the God who rests, the God who, like you said, creates order out of chaos and who is in control and sovereign over your days. And, I can say that, but I think what that looks like practically then is taking steps towards an unhurried life. So I would say, I want you to know him and I want you to live differently because of what you know to be true about him. And so my prayer is that you start viewing your day through the lens of eternity out of all things, because that's how you slow. That's really how you align your plans with his purposes.
Yeah. I'm so excited because I just got to part two and it's getting into that eternal mindset, and I am ready with my highlighter. Um,
Mhm.
so how are you, like, what sounds most restful to you right now? Like if you could do anything, how would you create margin?
Oh man. As a mom, I think anytime that I'm like, there's not other people asking me for a million things sounds really restful.
Yeah.
But,
Yes.
um, but, that's temporary. We can do these little getaways with my husband or whatever. And I think that would be so fun and would be a great way to
Hmm.
recharge. But
Yeah.
that's not going to create lasting margin. I think instead, my prayer is that my children would even start to see how to see God in their days. They're little, so it'll take some time. We're getting there, but um, that would be ultimately what's restful, for our house to be a place of peace, which
Yeah.
normally might. children are wrestling or,
Yeah,
acting like ninjas. So, I mean, this
I
looks different
understand that.
than,
Yeah. And
than
hey, a
your
getaway is a
picture.
welcome answer for margin. That is acceptable on the SolidWorks. I love it.
Oh,
I didn't even
man.
ask, how old are your kids now?
They are 8, 6, 3, and just turned 1. So,
Okay, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Fun, busy,
Oh,
lots
so
of
fun.
lots of wanting to create margin. Yeah,
Yes.
there. Ah,
Yeah.
that's so good.
Mhm.
Well, where can people hear more from Samantha Decker? And also, do you have any plans to write something else?
Mm. Yes, you can. I'd love to connect on Instagram or my newsletter is really where I share a little bit more of my heart, and I'd love to have you there. So, SamanthaDeckerWrites.com. You
We'll
can sign up
include that in
there.
the show notes too for anybody that wants to click on that and follow.
Awesome. And as far as plans, I would I'd say as the Lord wills. I have an idea percolating and stirring. Need the margin to be able to dive into that a little bit more, which, in this season of book launch, I'm not there yet, but I'm
Hmm.
just praying that the Lord keeps kind of stirring my heart in a direction. So we'll
Yeah.
see, Lord willing.
Well, good. I'm excited to hear that because I'm like, I think for sure we're going to hear more. And I'm excited to read it. Well, I just want to say thank you first for doing the work and creating the margin to write this book because it really is something when you first messaged me um that I was like, "Oh, I need this book." Like this is something that we have been talking about and looking at doing as a family and it can feel like maybe radical almost to
Mm-hmm.
do that and intentionally do that in the culture we live in, but um, it is so good and needed and so life-giving to read through it and feel like, okay, somebody else feels the same way and is taking actual steps to do it. So thank you for that, but also thank you for coming on today and sharing. It's been such a blessing and I can't wait to share the conversation with others.
Yes, thank you for having me. It was fun, and it's fun to connect both as authors and moms, and I'm praying that other people who are listening, you know, hear some of these truths and can apply them too, because it's what it looks like to pursue Jesus day by day, and I think that's worth learning about. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. And thank you all for listening in this week on the Saltworks. Make sure that you order this book. You won't want to miss this. Read it with your spouse or with a friend. And we would love to hear what you got from it. And we'll see you next week on the Saltworks.
This is my story. This is your story.